festival. You'll probably see me running around. If you have any questions, about anything throughout the week at sea, just grab me and hopefully answer that question for you. But yeah, this is a pretty cool idea. About to bring up Adam Dietrich, who's going to kind of lead this panel with some other esteemed people that he'll kind of introduce. But we talked about this idea 2 years ago, actually, almost 2 years ago now. It was going to be done in 2020. And obviously, we didn't have a festival then, so that was kind of sucked. But this is kind of nice to actually see this, follow through. And it's also something that we don't think is talked about enough. The production design thing. Usually when we do a workshop, it's how to raise money, directing, or cinematography. So this year we're actually trying to get outside the box a little bit. So thank you very much for coming out. I hope you guys enjoyed to that. I will bring up Adam Dietrich. Kind of give
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for being here. This is awesome for Oak Cliff to have us over at this incredible cultural center in the heart of Oak Cliff itself. For anybody that's not been here, this is a community, and it's hard because the Texas Theater where this film festival is located. Production design. You never hear about it, right? Like you go to film school, there's like a chapter on it. It's like, make sure you have a bed if there's a bed in the thing. Think about Hiller. Maybe not at your school, but at our school. So when Ashton and I started talking about this, I thought that was really cool to kind of dive with the audience and talk about production design, and very specifically because of the film festival and kind of the movies that we make, independent production design. Because if you're a production designer or you're a filmmaker in a union circumstance or with a large budget, it's going to be a different piece. But when you're making an indie film like you're seeing here predominantly, this art all of a sudden becomes work in hand, right? And everybody knows that if you shot a movie, even if you're a cinematographer, you have these ideas, but now you have to execute those things on the budget you have. And that's really where I've lived for 20 years, is trying to figure out how to make the wildest ideas come true with a budget of varying sizes. So with that, I'm going to kind of have a working man talk about production design. And today we have my buddy, Jonathan Rudak, who is a production designer who had a movie called Sister Amy at Sundance 2-3 years ago. And we worked together a lot. He's been my set decorator as well on movies that I've designed, and I've benefited from his extreme knowledge and talent. And so, Rudak, come on up. Two lovely ladies that I have just met, and I had the pleasure of watching their films this week. Becca Morin had designed Strawberry Mansion, which premiered at Sundance this year, I think. And we have the glory of watching it just after this, I believe. And it's an exciting, very visually complex film. So kudos to Becca. Becca, come on up. And Cassandra DeAngelis, who I had the pleasure of meeting this week. And she designed the Udo Kier, right? Is that his name? Udo Kier film that just played last night, Swan Song. I think it premiered last night, Swan Song. And an incredibly touching story about an older hairdresser who is at a senior living center and decides to kind of embark on a journey to recover himself in a way. And I really enjoyed the design. So, Cassandra,
I think it's true, and we'll kind of go through and talk about this together, but I think it's true that all of us have participated in independent film and in the art departments of independent film, not just as production designers. Is that true of everybody? There's some mics here that I think we have to share one.
Yeah. I've been like a set decorator on larger projects, and then production design, smaller things too. So I don't know. Yeah. It's nice to kind of be in the position of different roles on varying projects, because they're always different, and you always learn something new on every job. So
now that makes me think of something, because I don't know who everybody is in the audience yet, but production design. What is the role of the production designer versus the role of somebody else in the art department, like set decorator?
Well, the designer usually handles the entire aesthetic of the film with the director and the cinematographer. Underneath the designer is usually the decorator and an art director. The decorator picks all of the elements that go into a space. So say we wanted to film in here, the decorator would be in charge of the tables, the chairs, the mirrors, the drapes. The designer would be overseeing all of that. The art director is in charge of the structure builds, anything that's painted or kind of, all the walls here. And then the master of properties is the prop master. That's anything an actor handles. So a microphone. That would be usually the umbrella of underneath the production designer.
It's so curious to me. Like when I got into film, I came from the theater. I want to ask what you guys' background is, but when I got into film, I came in from theater, and immediately it was apparent to me that without that trinity of director, designer, cinematographer, you don't have a film. But oftentimes that designer was silent. It was like we obviously recognize the importance of a director. We obviously recognize the importance of a cinematographer. But then it would be like whisper of like, "Oh, is the designer here?" But in my experience, it's so vital, and that those three people have a relationship that is kind of unparalleled to others, so that you can disseminate information. And when you look at frames from a movie, it becomes clear that no matter how you frame it, there's something in frame. It's very rarely an extreme close-up of an actor only or something. So, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you think that trinity is quintessential, or do you think it's give or take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like the designer is the designer of the movie, and the photographer is the photographer. It's like, it is also like a title credit, but so often it is treated as a sort of unspoken kind of like, sort of silent piece. Pretty often, often there isn't even like a production design category in award shows, which is crazy because there is one for a DP, but like, why isn't there also one for production designers or anybody in the art department? So I don't know. Also in like film criticism too, I feel like sometimes like people don't even really know how to critique like a movie or talk about it. And sort of separate the art department from the rest of the film. I don't know. But that's sort of sometimes when I'm reading a film review, sometimes they're like that is just like not even really touched upon.
It's lacking.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the reasons that you do hear about cinematographers now is that their union actually fought for them to be kind of top billing with the director. It was something that happened, over the years. When film first began, up until probably the 60s, it was really the director he did everything. That's what you thought. That's what I thought when I was first watching films. I was like, oh man, Spielberg, he just puts together a great film. I love the way he uses lenses. It's not until later on that you start to learn, oh, actually, okay, wait, there's people that do all these different positions.
Yeah, man. Just on E.T., it's everybody's seen E.T. On E.T., what is the movie without that creature design? What is the movie without the red hoodie? What is the movie without the house and that kind of lamp-lit space that the single mother is living in? What is the movie without the shed out back that we first learn of E.T. and the baseball rolls out? What does that movie look like with all those elements? What if we hadn't chosen the redwoods to shoot those forest scenes in? And just those iconic movies. You go, gosh, Mac and Me is a E.T. like movie, but not necessarily reach the height of E.T. Is it just because of the design? Is it just because Mac wasn't quite as effective as E.T. himself? And anybody that's a fan of Mac and Me, I apologize. I'm a fan as well. I'm so. So, Rudak, you designed this movie, Sister Amy.
Yes.
That premiered at Sundance 2019. Austin filmmakers, I think. You got shot in Austin.
Shot in Austin. Filmmakers were in New York.
New York, okay. And a period piece. So
1926.
Yeah, so 1927. What does that conversation start like? Like, how do you get to those directors? It's a directing pair, right?
Yeah.
How do you get
Sam
to
and
those
Maria.
directors, and then what's that conversation like?
How do I get to the director?
Yeah, like, how's that project brought to you?
They came to town to do another period piece, a 1981 short film called The Ink Catcher. And the project just kind of got passed from designer to designer in town. Like everyone was like, no, you're crazy. It's going to be too hard to pull off with the budget you have. I'm not interested. And plus it's a short film. What do I care? And then they came to me and I just had I just sat down and like had coffee with them and had a really good conversation just about film in general. And I said, I'll do this crazy thing with you. Let's see if we can pull it off. And that was many, many months before we actually filmed. And so I had the time to go digging through thrift shops, actually up and down Jefferson Boulevard here to find all those period elements that we needed. And then I forget how many years later they called me up about Sister Amy, but they were like, hey, Rudak, do you want to do another period piece? And I was like, okay, yeah, I love period pieces. I've done a number of them. I did one with you. And they say, well, it's 1926. And I was like, okay, we're doing something crazy again. And then what was the rest of your inquiry here?
No, I just when you start talking about the specifics of the design, like it's a period piece, so there's a certain framework there that you're trying to adhere to. But how does that conversation develop with you and the directors and the DP?
Yeah, so everybody kind of had their own photo references. I went to the Dallas Public Library. They have like a really good historic photo library there, and like found, because everyone searches on Google or whatever, and you can get a certain type of images from there, but you don't get as interesting photos, I don't think, especially if they're, I don't know. The ones that we found in the library, I didn't see anything like it online. And so the conversation about the design really started from the historical photographs. What do we like in them? What elements do we want in the film? Can anything affect the way the characters are going to interact? Things like that. And then kind of evolves from there, continuing the conversations, with the DP, and they have an idea for color.
And Becca, your film is completely different than this. For anybody, your piece has a lot of kind of, I don't know, visual interest, obviously, but almost like a fun spectacle. There's a certain element of playfulness in the visual design that is outright that we're aware of. And I'm wondering the same question, just how does that develop in those early conversations?
Yeah, well, I mean, Strawberry Mansion was such a fun movie to be able to production design because it's so playful, and it's a really colorful movie, which is like so entertaining. And I don't know. I mean, I think we kind of it's a really fantastical film too, so it's kind of like approaching it in a practical way was also at times a little challenging. But we also have some animation in our film too, so that kind of like helped sort of take care of the more abstract things that were hard to think about practically making or having done. But I don't know. I mean, I think we really used time to our advantage, and we, collaborated with a lot of local artisans and craftspeople in the city of Baltimore, and that really was to our benefit also. And we had a break in between our chunks of filming so that we could have more time to construct and like make everything by hand and kind of like, pay all of the attention and time that we needed to the project. So that really worked to our advantage. And then also just using the strength of our locations. I think that's always on a low budget project. Like if you can find locations that can do half the work for you, then you're in good shape. So we had that to our advantage, and that helped us a lot.
That makes me want to ask you this question, because yours was really location based. I mean, you guys shot in Sandusky, Ohio, which is like a small town in northern Ohio.
Yeah, right on Lake Erie. Yeah.
Lake Erie. And so how involved were you in the location scouting?
From day one, it was the cinematographer Jackson and the director Todd Stevens. We all three were looking at nursing homes every day, and we realized very quickly it cannot be a real nursing home that we used, just because it looked too nice for the aesthetic that we were trying to pull off of him feeling trapped and kind of he needed to escape. So we ended up we ended up choosing an old civic center, actually, that has these green walls, are really muted, just felt kind of more institutional than we were going to find. And we pulled it off, and we filmed his actual nursing home room in an office, but we painted it the same color as the rest of the hallways that we found, that unsaturated green. And the color palette we leaned into based on the locations that we found. And I worked very heavily with the costume designer on that approach as well. So she implemented these teals and mauves in his costume design as well. And then as the movie progressed, we oversaturated everything. So it was easy for us because we filmed it in linear format. So we started unsaturated, ended very saturated. And
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of getting into there's the basics of production design, right? And I wonder for you guys, for me, it's like to start with the story. If I read the script, I really connect to it. If I'm doing it for art, I think there's always money, and there's things that you do for money, and you think of that. But if you're doing it for art, you start with the script, you see if you connect with it, you see what their personal connection to it is. Then you hear the director's vision, try to align with that, and see if your personal connection is responding back to that director's vision, and then maybe go into theme. That's me. Is that you guys as well? Kind of if the themes of the movie or if the theme of the movie is responding to you, and if you have a visual for what that might be that may not be already represented in the script.
yeah, I think the script is obviously the tool of how you figure out what it wants to be. And there's always key elements in the script, but it is absolutely up to us to delve deeper into these characters and who they are and what they're going through. And, there's these minute details. For example, I think at one point in the Swan Song script, there was a mention of his poodle. So we leaned very heavily into that. There's a gravestone. I engraved a poodle on the gravestone as well. And then the costume designer had him wearing a very warm poodle t-shirt in the nursing home.
Which is so good, by the way. I just want to interrupt you. So when you watch Swan Song, the poodle is everywhere, it feels like, but not in a giant way. And that's why it's so respected. This is the conversation that happens between I'm pointing at Jackson, the cinematographer, but the cinematographer and the director and the designer. I'm wondering if this is true, because the poodle on the shirt is somewhat faded. You're not like struck over the head with a poodle. And then the gravestone, you only show the top of the head, and you know that it's engraved the rest of the way, but really it's only prominently seen on the top. So unless you're watching, which you are, it's not bashing you in your face, The gravestone, and just on the indie level, who engraved, this is the real meat and potatoes of this for me. And I don't know if you guys are filmmakers, but somebody writes into a script, a gravestone with a poodle on it, right? And then you're the designer, and they got $5, and they're like, "Go make that happen." And you or one of the beautiful souls that you have working with you, because everybody in the art department is the most beautiful people. They had to figure out how to make an engraved poodle. So tell me, who engraved the poodle on the headstone?
It was an actual headstone, and we were very lucky with the city of Sandusky for helping us on so many levels as far as locations. And I drove by a monument making facility, and I went in and I asked them, I said, "Do you have a gravestone?" Very, very quickly, Todd did not want to have a foam gravestone. I completely understand this interaction that Udo has with the tombstone. We can tell if it's fake. We did not want to go that route, but it's also, starts at $1,500 to engrave a tombstone, and that is a big chunk of money that I did budget out appropriately in order to make this achievable. But this location or this business, I was like, "Do you have one that maybe you accidentally engraved on one side and we can flip it around and do the other side?" And they thought it was so ridiculous that eventually I think I wore them down enough where they were like, "We'll do it for $500 and we'll put it in for you."
That's an effective tool. Wearing people down, it's an effective tool. Put that in your toolbox.
Right. Just keep talking.
We did this movie that ultimately became called The Incident at Sparrow Creek, and this director Henry had everything storyboard, hand-drawn storyboards, 3 books of storyboards. Brilliant. So really my job became, envisioning a little bit, but mostly putting his vision to reality. And there was one scene where we have 12 Crown Vics. I think they were Crown Vics. And they're all supposed to be all black. He doesn't want lights on top. They've got the spotlights on the side. And in Texas, there is a picture car guy who's amazing, but our budget wasn't allowed for that. And there's not like rental companies like you have in LA or Atlanta even. So we're out there for people that own Crown Vics. And of course, it's hard to find people who will allow us to rent it for the price that we have, let alone them being black. So we end up, our 7-person art department, we find the 12 vehicles, from everybody and their mother. And
Very, very sketchily drive them to the location because, not registered, no transfer permits.
they all got paper plates.
We had one note, I think, from a sheriff or something that these guys are cool.
I forced Rudak to go with me. This is probably getting me in trouble. I forced Rudak to go with me into a very sketchy part of town, and we tracked down some guys who were not very necessarily the most friendly people, which they ended up
They
being.
came around. Yeah, they came around. Yeah. At first, they were like, "You're bullshitting us."
Yeah. But we chased them down. We got them to give us some stuff. Anyway, the story being though that once we get the cars to site, now we have to paint them black, right? And there's a paint out there, if you're ever in the circumstance, that antique car people paint their one antique car different colors to
Peel-
different car shows.
Peel paint.
And it's called peel paint. And
Get-
pros, like
get a
antique
mask.
car guys, they have rooms where they spray that down with the compressor and all that stuff. Well, we didn't have that, so we have the spray can version. And you've got these 7 sweet art department souls on an empty warehouse lot spray painting 12 entire vehicles in 4 hours before you shoot it, because you can only pay for 1 day of rental, right? Those are the kind of stuff that it's like, you might have a visionary artist, right? I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but you might have Picasso. But if Picasso can't get you the 12 Crown Vics and figure out a way to paint them and peel that paint off, well, that doesn't do you any good, right? Which is the difference between a production designer in the indie world and an artist in their studio working with the palette that they choose,
The hardest part is peeling the paint, by the way.
But it was a good party that morning. I did have a peel paint party. That was a pretty good time. Becca, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious about your incident like that, because I gotta believe you had so many on that movie Strawberry Mansion. When you see, I'm gonna pull a photo. Strawberry Mansion. When you see this, every frame of the movie is a painting that not easy to pull off.
I did have to paint a lot of things in the movie, actually, also. And one room entirely pink. I used to work, it's like, similarly to that car chalk, job story, you sort of find ways to sort of do things easily, but then you just got to figure it out, So I used to work at the Walters Art Museum in the exhibitions department for 7 years, kind of part-time. I would help them install exhibitions while I was also doing film stuff. But I'm still good friends with them, so they let me use their spray booth, and I was able to paint everything pink there when they were between their shows. So that was really helpful.
Vital to the movie.
Yeah, I needed it.
Look at this image. It's hard to see in here, but there are no paint drips.
Right.
I mean, I looked closely at this movie. You nary see even a little, it's incredible. And maybe nobody cares, but when you watch a movie, I don't know if you guys have been there, but I watch an indie movie and I see that paint drip, I go, oh, that's sweet.
Right. That's cute. Yeah. Also
Not a
distracting.
picture.
Well, I mean, there may have been some, but they did a little fix it in post, the kind of thing.
We're not going to talk about
All
that.
right, we're not going to talk about that. All right, that doesn't exist. But no, I did have my little crew of people helping, and it was we also had to paint a bunch of other things later also. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Here's another thing. So I just want to talk about this. This is so genius.
Greeking?
The teeth.
Yeah.
Yes. This toothpaste that's created for the project and has this brilliant brand, which definitely should become a product. People should be chasing after us because of the products that we have to create on the fly.
That's so true. Yeah, graphic departments really, do a number, and it's you can never show a name brand on film because you could get sued. So we always have to make our own. So it's that is also, it's like the little details are what make it so fun, and being able to play around with those things is always a pleasure.
who was teeth written in the script?
Albert, the director, was just like, let's just do this, and I had these vinyl letters, and rather than actually making a whole label to get sort of like
Uh-huh.
delicately stick onto the sort of like weird texture of
Awkward
a
surface.
tooth tube, we decided to just paint it metallic blue and put that there. I don't know.
So I want to ask this question because I think this is super important. Anybody that's a filmmaker out there, you say that you painted that rectangle on the tube itself. Is that
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
what did you paint it with?
I think I found a sort of like enameled, sort of like acrylic paint.
And a brush or what is it?
Yeah, I think I used a brush, but it used a couple coats,
Yeah. But I
yeah.
mean, you look at that tube though, and you think, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is just me because I'm geeked out. I'm on the set every day thinking about these things only. But I don't see any brush marks. I mean, that paint job was a good paint job. And somebody on an
Right.
independent film, you got such amount of time.
Right.
Not everybody's going to execute that at that level.
Well, I think it's also like I feel like art department people oftentimes kind of have to be good at a lot of different random things, and you have this like kind of like weird toolkit of tricks, and you have to kind of be able to refresh your memory from past jobs, being like, how did I do that? 2
Absolutely.
jobs ago. What's the best way for me to execute this thing in this moment right now, like MacGyver, and do a weird thing, that's so much of what we do also, so I don't know.
That's
but I
so
mean, not
true.
that painting a toothpaste tube is that extreme, but
No, but the execution, the quality of the execution is the key though there. Rudak, I know you got a story of, hey, this is last minute. Make something beautiful.
I think I tend to black out those moments. You could probably bring something up in like a film, the details, since we've done so many projects together where we're just like, okay, yeah. Who can we borrow a forklift from, or something?
Yeah, I mean, well, my big one is something that I screwed myself on, but I sometimes produce and design movies, which is an interesting. And we were doing The Vast Night, and beautiful director, incredible talent, Andrew Patterson. We have this street that we blocked down in a small town like Sandusky called Whitney, Texas. And I hate the street. It's a blacktop and it's got white lines painted. And I just hate it for a 1958 scenario. And so I have ordered a truck full of gravel or 2 truckfuls of gravel, and I've delivered it to the spot before anybody's been there because we're working all nights and I'm working splits. So we have this truckload. Well, when the guy gets there, I'm like, oh, are you going to spread it out? And he's like, no, I'm just dumping it. Bum, bum, bum. And now everybody lands on the site, and I'm pushing it with other art department. And now we invite everybody to get in. And now the director shows up, Andrew, and goes, what is this? And I was like, I didn't have time to talk to you about it. And I hope you love me, And luckily we had that relationship. We had already, built that trust. And he was like, I hope this is genius. And we spent 2 hours shoveling this gravel over this.
Somebody with a backhoe, or some sort of.
Ultimately, I get a guy in at the last minute that I've talked to before.
But then it rained and we couldn't find him the next day, so we had to go over again.
Yeah, but without that gravel, thank God, and thank God Andrew.
It looks
without
great.
that gravel,
Yeah.
it's not the thing. You know what I mean? It's that little tiny detail that maybe the director doesn't have the time to see, doesn't have the eye to see, whatever it might be, and that you have the opportunity to contribute if you have that relationship, if you have that trust, if you have that kind of, in my opinion, that trinity between the cinematographer and the director and the designer. What about you?
I just did a film during the pandemic, Steven Soderbergh's No Sudden Move, which is being released July 1st, I believe. But it's a period film. It's based in 1955. It's based in Detroit, Michigan, and we went so heavily. I was the assistant set decorator, and the designer was Hannah Beaker, who did Black Panther. But we were very. We spent a lot. We paid a lot of attention to detail, down to the pennies on the counter were period correct. And that is the reality: is you cannot take a camera and just put it into a room without us, especially this period movie, will be completely taken out of the film. And that was also it's a double-edged sword because, you know, you're like, hey, let's go get some B-roll outside. You can't do that. Exteriors, street signs, everything's completely different. You have to be prepared. So we always had a truck full of just street signs and stop signs and fire hydrants and mailboxes and everything ready to go in case we saw an extra corner. But yeah.
Which it's kind of a, I mean, like we were talking about before, it's kind of a totally, there's a shared skill set, but like you said, on a movie, I just say a huge movie, but that's not necessarily true, but on a bigger budget movie, the budget has increased to account for everything being chosen, right? And so you've given all of the artists, not just art department, you've given all the artists the time to handpick every detail, to handcraft every detail. And oftentimes in the indie world, in my experience, but I'm interested to hear what you guys say, but in my experience in the indie world, that's not the case. You're not only paying the people to be prepared, but you're paying them for their jazz. You're paying for them for the experience of going, yeah, we didn't know this location until 2 days before. How fast can you turn around something and make it serve the story? Have you guys experienced that same thing?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you're familiar. You can have it cheap, you can have it good, and you can have it fast. You can only pick two, and then obviously the third one is. But everybody obviously wants all three. On that Soderbergh film, we were racing to not be sick. We were filming. We began filming again in August, and we were shooting 6-day weeks. And yes, we had the money, but we didn't have any time, and we were working 10-day weeks. And it was very brutal just to try to beat COVID taking us out, you know. And yeah.
I want to get kind of into some weeds real quick. So we talked about, you broke down the kind of designation of the art department and the roles, but let's talk about, I think production design, you tell me if you guys are clear on this. We know what a production designer does, right? They help create the visual of the entire film. The production designer in a normal sense is helping to influence all of the departments that are visual. So it's wardrobe, it's CG, it's props, it's construction, it's set decoration. They're see all of that. The set decorators just handling the furnishings and things like that. Talk about a lead man, because I think that's a really important job. That
a lead man is the decorator's right hand. They do all the logistics. We actually talk about this very often, how there are lead man sets. And those are the very technical ones that have, you know, that's not necessarily a decorator's going to be doing. They'd be like, hey, that's a lead set. Let them go handle this very intense. Maybe it's like we're on a Navy ship and it's a hallway there. That would be the conduit. That would be the piping. That's usually something a lead man does. But the lead man also handles all the management of the set dressers and the schedule, figuring out union turnarounds, making sure the Teamster, which is our truck driver for the set decorating truck, is a rep, like has a certain turnaround, knows the addresses of where everyone's going, deals with the locations, and the location manager, figures out a kind of a prep schedule and a wrap schedule and how to get in and out of these sets pretty quickly.
yeah, and in my basic way, I just call him the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
You know, because a lead man, he better swing a hammer. He better understand style. He might not have to have his own style necessarily or her own style, but they got to understand your style because they're going to be making some decisions on their own. And it's kind of and again, I keep looking at Jackson like he's a part of this panel. Sorry, Jackson. But in my opinion, it's almost like a second AC. You know, if you got a great second AC, they're ahead of the game. They're ready for you. You're not having to waste any time. They've got your lens there. They've got everything prepared. And a lead man does that. Like, if you've got the right lead man or lead woman, there should be more lead.
The lead person.
Lead person. Then you show up on set and you're just like amazed that, oh my God, that happened. You know, and if you don't have the right person, you're like, oh. All right, so prop master. We didn't talk about it a lot. Prop master, because in your film, Becca, Teeth, is that the person that handled this, or is this you? How many people are on your team in this movie now?
It's a great question.
Like me, my mother. There was
I had my lovely art director, Lydia Milano. And I had my friend Miles. And we had some college interns. And we had lots of volunteers and people from the community helping us. And it was a team effort on everyone's parts. But yeah, it was a lot of, yeah, we were all doing all the roles. It was maybe not quite so union, but
We see Strawberry Mansion. That's the understatement of the century. I mean, like, every part of this movie is visual. You could have, no offense to anybody, but it's so visual. If it was an iPhone shooting it, and it was still this, there's the question for me of like, the values, But when you tell me that there's 3 people and a bunch of volunteers, I'm like, somebody's got huge faith in the universe that you're going to show up. You know what I mean? Kudos to them.
yeah, I mean, it was a big team effort on behalf of a lot of people, but yeah, it would, the main, technically the art department was, not that many people. Yeah.
Is the art department taking care of these guys?
Yeah, so that was really an amazing kind of like time-consuming thing. So those are all made from VHS tape. So we unrolled VHS cassettes and then hot glued them to these suits, and they took 2 hours for just the front of one panel. So and they're full body suits.
Are all of these people real, or are some of these?
Yeah,
people
those are
put
all
in?
of our friends.
I was gonna ask how many VHS tapes did it take?
It took a lot. Yeah, and it was
And where did
and
you find them all?
it was so
There's 19 in just this frame.
yeah, I mean, it was like, it was a lot of sourcing. I mean, the thing about this movie is that we had time on our side. So, going into the project, I was just like collecting things for months. So like, oh, you have some VHS? I'm going to come over to your house and I'm going to get them. That happened for a long time. People would donate things to us, and then we would, use them. And then we'd have, the interns help hot glue the sweatshirts. And, sometimes they stayed longer than 2 days, and that was great. But also,
So cheap and good, and fast is out the window.
there we go. Yeah.
There you go.
But also, it was really like a community effort, and Baltimore is like a really good creative community, and we have so many friends that live there, and everybody wanted to help. So it was a good experience to be a part of. Yeah, and we were very fortunate in that way.
I want to ask you one last question. I'm going to
Yeah.
get on Rudak for a minute, but just this image. You talked about how there are. Can you guys see an image? Oh, you can't see it. It's daylight. Let's go back to an image that reads. So does this read up there? So this image obviously has some post effect put onto it. How much of that were you part of creating, and how much was brought to the film?
Albert and Kentucker, they mostly took care of like the animation and kind of, making those decisions. I didn't have anything to do with that, but that was the beer sponsor that I, found for the movie. It's just like, it is so much about advertisements in the movie that, the product placement is, intentional, and the things we had made for the movie were very intentional in those ways too. And we had these great graphic designers, post typography in Baltimore, who made a bunch of things for our movie also. And but the animation stuff was all Albert and Kentucker.
Awesome stuff, and awesome how it works together in the film. Even more impressive that it was done separately in a way. Rudak, so we talked about different roles, but in Sister Amy, you had to build a good number of sets. So I just want to talk about construction on an indie budget and an indie circumstance. We talked about a little bit about your paint job, which you used your relationship from the museum and their paint shop, which is brilliant. You and your 2 other people. Thank you, budgeters. So talk to me about this. So this is Rudak doing a previs on a set.
so that everybody on the team can figure out dynamics. So talk to me about that.
Yes. Yeah, we knew our biggest challenge was going to be, especially this set, because it involves a dance routine, and they wanted to be able to change the lighting drastically. And like for that, they needed like huge overhead lights that we would not have been able to fit into a location. But we knew our budget limitations, and so I sat down and like in SketchUp, figured it out. It's actually very easy to figure out. But I sat down, figured it out, and then built all the sets that we needed to build. I built in SketchUp based on how much they would cost, and then I sent those files over to Carlos, the DP, because he was in New York with Santa Maria, and they all sat down together in these models, and he was able to drop in the camera with the lenses that they wanted to film these scenes with, to see if what we could afford to build would actually work for the film, or if we'd have to figure something else out. And then ultimately, it did work. There's some things changed between this and the actual building of the set. We made the windows bigger and stuff. Like those were historically kind of more accurate size jailhouse windows. We made them bigger just for lighting. And it was also a situation where once we figured out, okay, we can, building these will work for us. It was then a conversation with the producer as well. So if we build these, we can't afford to decorate them. And the producers like Bettina Barrow and some of the other producers were amazing, and they went out, okay, well, that's a challenge that we're going to figure out, and went out and talked about community effort. Like she really went out and like established relationships with prop houses, specifically, can't remember their name now.
Adam Woolley's?
Yeah, the Woolley brothers.
Adam Woolley, and he's out in Bee Cave in Austin. You
Yeah.
got to go check him out if you're making a movie in the Austin area.
Yeah.
He's got a ton of period stuff. They
Yeah.
started a prop house during the remake of The Alamo.
Yeah.
So he gathered all of those props, and then he's got a lot since then. It's very specifically period stuff. But
Yeah, and so basically, like, I would say 85% of all of our set deck was donated by the Woolley brothers. Like, they came on as producers, and something that we wouldn't have been able to shoot the film if the producers hadn't believed that we could do it and made those deals for us.
so this set that we're looking at.
Yeah.
This is all build.
Yeah.
And you're on a studio.
Yeah, in the studio.
And so lighting has given us a great sunlight outside, and you guys have built a ceiling here, and you guys have used some like 1x4s or something to cover the seams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was some furring.
I just think that's a really, again, on an indie scale, you got these 1x4s that are super cheap. They perfectly fit with the look of the thing. I never questioned it as an audience member. And I think ceilings are incredibly hard on a tight budget to pull off.
Yeah.
I have succeeded and also failed at that endeavor. So I just look at this and I go, man, that's one of those details that if you didn't pull it off or you didn't come up with something to make that work, an audience immediately goes, indie film, that's sweet,
Yeah, I mean, that was the big fear. Is like, can we build something that looks, good enough in the wheelhouse of the style of film that we're making?
Have you guys ever dealt with ceilings on a studio build that you're designing, and how did you deal with it?
I'm trying to think. I mean, to be honest, most of the set builds that I've had to do, I just did a show for FX a couple months ago in New York, and I mean, we didn't have a ceiling.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
I don't know. You have the drop lighting, TV style, so you just cut the frame. You don't show the ceiling. I don't know.
It's kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or bad, but also I guess we're getting more and more in that world where some things are indie even though they're not, right? Like we're still, especially with online shows, sometimes you're put into a budgetary circumstance where you're thinking a little bit more like an indie filmmaker in the 90s than you are maybe a traditional studio project.
And on this week specifically, we discovered we needed the ceilings through the kind of the previs because of the some of the angles that they wanted to get. I think I included a few in there. they wanted to get some low angles of her on top of the table.
Well, I think he came up with a great solution to connect the 4x8 to whatever he was using. We use cloth, we use muslin as well.
Yeah, 'cause I feel like we've done soft ceilings before,
Yeah.
and they're
That's what
not.
those are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but nothing like a solid structure build. I don't think I've dealt with.
Oh, well, yours are soft ceilings and they just have those beams that go across?
Yeah.
Oh, smart.
Wow.
And this-
Duh. That's a good idea. Everybody mark that down. You can remove the ceiling easily and put light up. Jackson loves you.
It's all stapled on the frames, and then it looks ridiculous until you get a good scenic in there to paint it.
Scenics are so important.
Scenic painters are very important.
Does everybody know what a scenic is? So a scenic is a person that comes in and paints something that looks nothing like reality, and then he makes it real or she makes it real. So it's amazing to watch a scenic work.
It's my favorite thing. I watched this one scenic artist, and she was making faux marble, and she was just dropping this rag over and over on wet paint, and it looked amazing. It looked incredible. And I was like, how are you such a magician? Like, do I just become a scenic? Maybe that's all I need to be in my life.
I'll make some bank, girl. We were talking about the gravestone earlier in your film, Todd, but then there's certain things that a scenic, no matter what you do, you're not going to quite get there, and that's so true, and it's so smart when somebody knows that, and it's not like a I don't know. Sometimes people project that, but then there's other circumstances, definitely like that headstone, where that's just true. It's going to be very, very challenging to make that real in an intimate circumstance.
Well, I know Todd and I actually discussed how do we make that gravestone seem like it was not taken care of. That nobody had visited his partner, and we didn't want to go overkill with more weeds. And I know Udo had a note that he wanted to be kind of like scraping moss off of the name, and Todd and I really discussed it, and we thought that was very kind of just over the top. It didn't really match the other gravestones that were next to us. So in order to make us feel that it was unkept, we actually decorated the other gravestones and left this one kind of isolated. And that did have that effect, as opposed to just overgrowth happening. It would be like, that's kind of insane, because usually cemeteries maintain a good site.
So, Rudak, on this image here that I got pulled up, Sister Amy is in this white robe with this bright red cross and this gold necklace in an otherwise very earthy set. And I just love how this, this wardrobe and the the necklace, which prop, is working with the set. What did you guys talk about to kind of achieve that, to help this character pop off in there?
Well, we always knew that her dress was going to be white, and Juliana, the wardrobe designer, came to her office was right next to the set, and so she saw it when we were painting it. Which, funny aside about the bringing in a scenic, I actually tried to be a scenic for this set and painted it myself with an intern, because I started in construction and painting, and I was like, I can do it. Got done, and everyone kind of signed off on it, and I was just standing there after everyone left, and I was like, this looks like a paint job. It doesn't look real. And so the next day after we, looked at my budget and made sure I could afford a scenic, and then called them up to get in here, because this looks ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous, but just it wasn't up to the standard that I thought it needed to be, especially when the bright lights of the dance routine come on. It's not going to look good. But back to the wardrobe.
Which also, I just want to ask, we've all been in these circumstances where we realize our shortcoming within the budget, and we're trying to figure out what the solution is to get it to the creative place that we want, the value that we want. And I don't know if this is the case for you, but sometimes the director doesn't have a problem with what you've executed because they don't have that exact perspective. And so they don't see that paint drip, or they don't see that not quite reality. I'm wondering if that was the case in this circumstance, and then how do you quantify that? Because sometimes if the director doesn't have a problem with it, then budgetary, then somebody comes in and goes, well, why are you spending $200 on something that Tommy doesn't have an issue with?
Because that's our signature.
Yeah.
Drop it. I love that answer.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
That was like the same thing. It's like,
I don't want to
be watching the film and then be taken out of it.
because of what I thought was a self and then the white dress in that room. The big challenge for the white dress in that room is that at one point she gets down on the floor, which was covered in sand, but
We had to figure out how to make it look dirty without getting on it. So the ceiling was also some sort of actual ceilings on it. It looks dirty, but it wasn't.
What, does anybody have any questions? Before I forget and we're out of time? Yeah.
You had mentioned at the start that there's like critics are kind of bad at distincting the two, like art direction and production design. What do you think like the film critics can do to like make a better comparison between the two, or like distinct?
Well, I think it's not even a difference between like the art director and the production designer. I mean, I think, or it's just like sometimes in criticism, they're just like, Martin Scorsese's choices were beautiful, or whatever, and they were, but also they were somebody else's too. So I don't know. I mean, it's like not one person makes a film; an army of people does. And I think so often people who don't actually work on crews of filmmaking don't understand the what goes into it. If you're just in like a critical, like if you're just writing reviews and you've never actually worked on a film before,
I think
you know
also,
what I mean?
yeah, and I would just say too, and a total speculation, and we're not talking about every critic in the world, right?
Absolutely.
No. But I just want to clarify that, because I think that some critics do a really good job and they have a background to understand the input of design and film. But I think in general, like I started the conversation, in film school, you don't have a lot of time where you're focused on art department or on props. And I would argue the same thing is true for casting, which doesn't have an Academy Award, which who thinks that's crazy? I mean, if anybody's made a movie, your casting director is a huge part of finding the right talent and making that movie come together. The fact that they don't have an Academy Award is like, that blows my mind. But I think that a lot of the background of filmmakers and the people that orchestrate the industry, their knowledge base is more camera and light. And the thing that is essential to the, people say, well, without a camera, you don't have film, that's the argument. But also without a set or without talent, all of these things, we can come up with scenarios where it's not true, but the predominant time, those things are true. So oftentimes critics don't have a background in design or art, so it's hard for them to comment, but they do have a background in film. And so they're able to comment more regularly.
Editors too. I feel like editors don't even have.
They get no love.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in so many award ceremonies, like I don't even like Indie Spirit. Like I don't even know if they have a production design category.
Does anybody know if they do? I don't know. Yeah.
And again, I think more than anything, it would be, as we all love when we read criticism, we like things that are very detailed. We like things that make associations and help us understand what the craft is. Just like when you go to a museum, it's great to have that little tag that says this was created at this point, blah, 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 right? Instead of just experiencing the thing alone. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if more of the element of the film itself was included in that than the things that we're used to, like acting and cinematography?
I wonder if it's a philosophical thing, because ultimately, as production designers, we don't want people to notice our work. We want it to influence the experience of the work and on a subconscious level, right? We want to get under their skin and into their memory, trigger things. But like, we don't necessarily want someone to go, man, I love the production design of that film, because at that point, then you're not paying attention to the story. Which, as designers, you brought up two things I want to talk about: the history, like how did you guys get into production design? But then also, like, as designers, can you watch films without getting distracted? Because I have a hard time doing that these days.
Watching a film and not being distracted by the design, or just in general being distracted.
By the design, yeah.
Well, I just have a hard time watching movies now. I feel like I have no time. Yes, I feel like if I can watch a film and not be distracted by the design, that means I'm very much immersed in the story, and it's not just one piece that's standing out to me. Obviously, design is important. Obviously, cinematography is important. All of it is. But if it all comes together and it's just this cohesive thing that you're experiencing, I usually know that that's a great film. And it's not just one thing that makes it great, it's the entirety, all of it together.
I definitely am that way. I can watch a movie and just get sucked right into it. If it's I think there's like a bar, or there's a certain bar of like
like any relationship, it's definitely a relationship. So any relationship, as it starts, you start to learn whether you want to continue that, and if you do, it kind of engages you no matter what those flaws are. The flaws just accentuate the beauty of the film in a way, unless it doesn't meet that bar, and then you go, I mean, usually I just think it's so hard to make movies. It's so challenging. The more you make them, the more you go, what a miracle that you guys made this.
Yeah, I mean, when something really impressive happens practically in a movie, I always get taken out of the film and how do they do it, or if there are continuity errors, which happens, and now my brain is like trained to see it, and it's so distracting, and I can't not watch a movie and notice.
I will say too on the continuity thing, and in general with flaws, I know that as a filmmaker myself and as a supporter of so many indie filmmakers, we just beat ourselves up, and it's so hard to go through that process. And if you take a minute, you step back to watch things that are bigger, better budgeted, studio projects, a lot of people behind them, you still see the same things. Everybody's got those flaws, and how detailed do you get as you lash yourself for the mistakes? You know what I mean? I have a movie. I won't say what the flaw is, but I have a movie that I made a huge flaw on, and we fixed it. But for the most part, but when I watch the movie, I always see it. No one else has ever mentioned it. No one cares. But when I watch the movie, all my eye goes to is that flaw. And I know I could have done something. That's why it matters. God dang it.
It's like the paint job. You have to do it. When you see it, you just have to change it.
That's right, yeah. And you did, and I didn't. So let's
hire me, not you.
We had a scene in Swan Song. Actually, it was the first thing I wanted to deal with because it's such a difficult. I didn't know how we were going to accomplish it, but Udo, at one point in the film, he is wearing a chandelier. He pulls a chandelier out of his back room. He wears it, and it's practically lit, and he's dancing on stage, and it explodes, and it's this whole thing. The first thing I purchased on that movie was a chandelier, and we were figuring out how to rig it, and I was working very heavily with the costume designer, with the electrics. It was so many department heads coming together, figuring out, and Udo is just such a trooper sitting there while we're hanging this chandelier on his head, and we're taking crystals off so it's not super heavy and it's padded, and it had to be established first, so we had to get it figured out very quickly, and it was a wild scene.
Well, and also so, at least in the finished movie, so important to the film. I mean, it wasn't a gag.
No.
It was a thing. It was an emotional narrative component. So the responsibility to execute that too, and I know you feel that, just from what you've already talked about, we all have that like emotional burden that we're like, oh, God, if I fail today, what have I done? Yeah.
Because we talked about your relationship with costume designers. Where does that line, where does that conversation start? And when the line is drawn, for example, with the HST, those aren't costume design, that's actual production.
There's no clear line in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the director. If we're making a set, say, for example, I'm on a film right now that's period 1988, and the director wants the costume designer to supply the clothing for the sets that we are going into the houses. And that makes sense because it should match the character, and who knows better than the costume designer. So a lot of the times, if we don't have that push, I will naturally go find the costume designers and have that conversation with them prior. And that also is important too. If I want to know, maybe there's an actor that's laying in bed, I want to know what they're wearing so the sheets don't clash, or maybe it makes them look really great together. So there are a lot of these conversations and meetings that we have in pre-production and during the process. Not just with costume designers, but with props, with special effects. We usually do a breakdown and have these questions and have these meetings with them to make sure all bases are covered.
I think that's also where, you get in different situations, but the best case scenario is that the producer and the director, they hire a cinematographer and they hire a designer, and then you hire an audio, so that all of those hires stem from those three people. You guys tell me if you feel differently. And that way all of those relationships are close enough, even if they're new, that people are open about those things, and you make sure the best person for that specific task
is doing it, because that'll differ according to people's skill sets as well, especially if you're not in a union circumstance. And you know, Becca over here with like 3, her and 2 people and volunteers, which I'm not, we're all in that circumstance. We're all in that circumstance sometimes, but I'm just impressed that people yeah, so I think the line changes all the time. And if you've never been on this, I'm always shocked, like prop masters, this has nothing to do with your question, but prop masters deal with director's chairs. Where does that come from?
They lost some bet, I bet. I mean, they must have.
Yeah.
I don't know
They
why.
told me, you go the director's chair.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
like why is that a thing? Like, why- I feel so bad for props having to deal with that still, but I feel like there's some story that I don't know.
On an indie film, I'll tell you this, we do not do director's chairs.
No, yep, nope.
I apologize, I love you, but don't ask us to do director's chairs.
Todd, you got director's chairs.
Yeah, but it changes all the time because, and then with I know in other films that we've done a lot of films that have a lot of action, violence, explosion, practical effects, and somebody getting shot and blood, this kind of stuff that's incredibly hard to pull off as an indie film. And every time we do a movie, I'm really lucky that I have a prop master that's one of my best friends and so easy for me to work with. But on every movie, if that changes, you got to reinvestigate who should be in charge of the sheriffs and the patches specifically. Like if it's some prop masters in the world, that's not their skill. So maybe we swing back to the wardrobe, see if they have a good patch person.
That same with like maybe instructor, I've seen instructor next to comment, so practical, like kind of demon outfits and masks. Are those more costume or those more production design?
Those were made by this like amazing company that's in Baltimore, and they were local, so they made like the rat costumes and the blue demon also, and the wolf. So and that was taken care of by them. So that was not the wardrobe department, or it was more just a relationship we made with them, and that they kind of took care of that for us, which was great.
Immaculate.
Yeah, they're really great. I think they do a lot of like they're sort of like a furry kind of company, but then they also
That has a lot of implications.
but they made great costumes for our movie. Yeah.
Furries, if you don't know, they wear furry outfits, but they have openings in certain spots. I learned it on a movie. Yes.
Questions for Cassandra. How much of the bar, how much did you manipulate the space?
That's a great question. So we actually looked at a few different bars initially in prep and really wanted the space to just be odd. It needed to feel like the gay culture of Sandusky took over something interesting. And we ended up deciding to use a tiki bar that exists in Sandusky. And we did manipulate the space to really, feel like we built the stage that Udo comes out on. And we put the gold lame curtains up ourselves. The lighting, we did light it ourselves. Is that right? We did.
They had a lot of house lights.
They're worth it. We leaned into those colors.
Great help.
Yeah, the big help of house lights. But we did cover like the majority of the bar was covered in dollar bills, and that didn't really feel correct. So we did end up put up some wood paneling, and we fabricated some drag show posters. Like it was a space that these very celebrity drag queens had been performing at for a while. To really kind of feel like there was a history and character to the bar. Yeah, so we did a little bit, but we definitely leaned into the location.
I have a selfish question. Has anybody, who's seen Swan Song already in here? Okay, so not everybody will get this question, but I want to ask about kind of a subtle set in the movie, and I want to ask it in context of a larger scenario. Oftentimes, you watch a movie and it's not a Wes Anderson film, or it's not the like we were just talking about the gay bar at Sandusky that's very specific. So in Swan Song, there's a set, and I believe it's where the grandson lives. I believe that's true. You tell me if I'm wrong, because I only saw it once. But there's this incredible blue-green curtains that are ceiling to floor, and on these beautiful windows. And then there is two kind of striking red chairs as a part of the living room setup. There's other things, but those are really standout images. And I don't know why, but that when I left Swan Song, visually, that really stuck with me. Just that space. I want you to remind me what was happening, but visually, emotionally, I left with that. And I wondered where that set came from, if it was there, if you chose things, and how that impacted the emotion of that scene.
Sure. So that location, we were very lucky in finding that location. It was pretty turnkey for us, but we did decide on that space because those colors again became oversaturated. It was the same greens that we started off with in the beginning of the nursing home that were the drapes. That red, it's more of a mauve, but it's a deeper mauve of those chairs. So it really felt weird that the universe was like giving us these specific things. And Todd and I often speak about this, how the color palette really decided itself. Like we did not force anything on that. It just started coming together, and it felt so organic. And so these locations, once we knew what we were doing, these locations just started appearing. We realized what we needed to do. And that location specific was like very sensitive. So we didn't alter very much there, minus the Linda Evans painting I had fabricated.
It's cool. It's cool. In the movie, there's and you just mentioned it. I just want to say it again. There's a connection between that space and the place that he's been stuck. Right. And emotionally, it makes so much sense, even if you're not conscious of it. And I think that's the power of design, is that we have this influence over your imagination, and mostly you're unaware of it. Right. And it's cool when we are aware of it. Sometimes we're not. Right.
Well,
Sometimes
we put chandeliers. I put a chandelier everywhere because I really wanted that to be visually like everyone to see. He sees these chandeliers. It's like this ghost that's haunting him. And he's attacking it really when he puts it on his head. And we chose a lot of these locations because we have these gorgeous chandeliers that already pre-existed. And again, that location happened too. And I think they even had a moment where Udo looks up at it because of it. So it was lovely.
Really cool.
Anybody got a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know all of you talked about kind of the 11-hour miracles you pulled off given time and budget constraints.
Yeah.
I've also, in my experience, seen a lot of like stuff that goes on the set where you're like, I don't know if this is really enough to save us. So I'm wondering, I know maybe you don't have yourselves on camera, but if there's anything that you would ever like put on the set that like, wasn't worth that or failure in your opinion. That,
I'll be the first to stand in front of the firing squad. Thanks. So this movie, Vast Night, that we made, there's this epic scene where an older woman gives a monologue about where her son has been abducted by aliens. Has anybody seen the movie? And it's pivotal. And you're inching into the finale, right? And we had gotten, I don't know, remember who it was on the team, but we had gotten a 50s chair. It took place in 58.
And I kind of loved that chair, so I kind of fought for it, even though it was anachronistic.
Well, the 50s chair you loved, or the chair that ends up in the movie?
Chair in the movie.
Yeah. So the 50s chair is this atomic age chair. I think it's pink, and it's got these really streamlined contours to it. But meanwhile, we had this other chair that we had picked up as just a part of the collection of furniture that might be in this movie. And it was a cloth chair that had if I remember correctly, like a mustard, and it was wood arm. Well, in 1958, according to our research, there aren't wood-armed sofa chairs. And so we couldn't find, and we had used everything in that movie we saw in a yearbook or an archival photograph. We didn't use any magazine images as references. We tried to use real-world photos as our reference points. We had no reference points for this chair, and it was going to happen in 3 minutes or, I don't know, 3 hours or something. I don't know. And we were looking at this pink chair that fit. We had images, and we were like, all right, get it out. Let's put the thing in. And of course, not everybody on set is even aware of our concern. Nobody was, honestly. But it just felt emotionally right. And no one's ever mentioned it, but they also don't mention us in reviews anyway. So so for us, every time we watch it, we know the little triumph we had. That's an emotional secret for us. But it could have been a fail if anybody had called us out on it, or we weren't right, you know.
But it just felt right for her character, you know, the way it kind of enveloped her, and I don't know, something like that. It just felt right. So we're like, it feels right, so let's just go with it, and hopefully, you know, no one gets on a tweet about it.
To be fair, I will say this, because I didn't throw myself under the bus as much as I thought I would. I think the movies that I would really have epic fails on, you don't know. You know what I mean? And I think part of the epic failure is there's a disconnect emotionally. The movies that I could talk about that have those miracles are the movies that I emotionally connected with so strongly that they still resonate with me. I still think about them. And the movies that I didn't connect with, and maybe there were failures on because of whatever factors, I don't even think about. You know, like that. I don't pull them up. You know, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't even know if I'm intentionally burying them, but I do.
We also put a Star Trek book in her bookshelf because we started giving her a backstory that she was a time traveler.
Oh right, yeah. We had a whole.
We just
There's a
went
whole
with
thing
it.
happening in that scene that maybe we haven't told you.
Okay, so this is on a movie I decorated called Brightburn. We were filming it in Atlanta, and there's this scene where the house gets destroyed, and everything in the house, you know, the director really wanted these elements of the house in front of it. Like there's a plane crash into the house, it's kind of like a wild thing. And so, you know, there's this very awesome couch that I had selected. It's not available in multiples. And we lit it on fire to give it like, you know, special effects, lit it on fire. And we realized we were not done shooting the inside of the house. So this couch, we had to, I had to find somebody who could recreate this with a like very correct pattern. And it was a bad mess up, but we fixed it. Yeah.
How long did it take?
So how long? You burn the couch down.
Burn the couch. But you wouldn't know. You would watch it and go, oh, that's a, you know. And
But how long does it take in real life? Like the couch is burned on Monday.
Couch is burned on Monday. So they knew, you know, we were very open about the problem. And so they scheduled it for me to give me time to get the couch built. So it ended up being okay, and the couch looked great. So it was the couch emergency. There's always one.
To some degree, too, you want a designer and a team that won't tell you the truth all the time,
Right.
right? Because you've got to be making decisions as an art department. What is the miracle you can pull off? And what is the thing that this is going to get dicey?
Right.
And the only thing you want to bring to the director is the thing that is dicey. That is like, oh, you know.
Yeah, they don't want to know how the sausage is made. They just want it. You know what I mean? That makes it weird.
I think that's also where it comes into like talk to past directors that have worked with designers that you're going to work with. Because some of that is that the intimate relationship where it's like, no, you can absolutely trust this person that on Monday at 7 it's going to be there, you know, or the opposite.
Right. Or, you know, it's nice when, you know, there's a big enough crew that it's not, you know, that.
Or budget properly is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or just like, you know, or I mean, you know, varying projects always have varying, I don't know. Yeah.
I will say, if you know, this is something that, and everybody knows this, but I'll say it, is if you're budgeting a film and you've never worked in art department, you should probably consult somebody that's been in art department, right?
Yes.
Because if you just imaginary number it up, that's like imaginary numbering up a camera on a DP, right? Like, oh, well, we're going to shoot on a Alexa. That will be $5 a day. Well, you're going to be shocked, you know? And there always can be miracles, but probably budget accordingly.
Right. Yeah. It's always when someone writes a script, I don't know that always they're thinking of how much will that cost when I'm writing it. Yeah. But it's,
Absolutely,
yeah,
they
but
are
that's,
not.
yeah,
right?
but
We
there's
can all agree with that, right? Todd you didn't write the Swan Song and go, that's $5. This is
Right.
$15.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm just wondering, when you're shooting a film that's about like a very specific cultural audience, where you're like working with a scene about a very specific audience, like the Black Beauty Shop and Swan Song, do you ever like bring in experts or just do a lot of research to make sure that you're depicting community in a way?
That's a great question, and it's both. We do a heavy research dive, both into the aesthetic of, what would that space be in a place like Sandusky, Ohio, not just a beauty shop, a Black beauty shop, anywhere. Who would be there? What would the building look like? And absolutely, we bring in people. I have in the past on other films as well, as far as like the posters and the materials that are there. What are they selling? Are they selling a product, or is it just a salon? Actually, no, that salon existed in its space. We didn't really alter that one either. There's a jar of pickles that made it in. That was like right on the counter, and I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I watched it last night, and I was like, it is a little distracting, but it is hilariously, it was that already, that they existed. They're sitting there snacking and cutting hair. I mean, it was like, I kept that in there for that reason.
Who doesn't want a pickle? I think that's true too. I think it's true of all movies, of all content of movies. So it goes. It's not just the multicultural thing, but it's also you got a police force, or you got a library. All of those elements, hopefully you're trying to be authentic, or you're choosing not to be, and that's a choice. I think the Coen brothers went on record of saying we've never done any research in our lives.
Wow.
Something to that effect, which is amazing because they're like every movie is so detailed.
Yeah.
But if I'm wrong about that, don't. Yep.
If you all touch on a skill or personality characteristic that you felt like came in handy in your professional career.
Can I back up and then we'll get to that question? Because Rudek, you asked it. What's the background? Like, how do you get to production designer? What did you go to school for? How did you land your first job? Blah, blah, blah.
I was in the music. Well, actually, I'm born and raised Los Angeles, California. So is my mother. So I'm a native of California, and I was a child actor, actually, when I was very young.
Oh, no.
Don't worry, I got in a lot of trouble. So I remember.
IMDb.
No, I wasn't in anything that was theatrical, but I remember very distinctly when I'm asked this question, this is usually my response, I got in trouble because I was on the props truck, and I was playing with everything, and I wasn't on stage, and the director was very upset with me. I think that's probably the beginning of the origin story. Also, my dad used to take me to tons of garage sales and use me as the negotiator because I was a cute kid. And I'd go give him $2 for that gravy boat. And I think those coupled together probably made me interested in the elements that make a space special, as well as, it is like the tiny details in life, I think, are what makes things beautiful. And I think that's what we create as production designers and decorators and everybody in our field. We really pay attention to those things, so it really feels all together. There you go.
I guess I come from an art background, so like my parents are in the arts, and I went to MICA, Maryland College of Art, for printmaking. So I went to art school, and then took a lot of like art history classes, but they were all mostly focused on film theory. And I've always had an interest in film, but then kind of got into it because a friend was making a movie, and then I was like, I'll just do that. And then I kind of just fell into working in the art department, and then did the free intern period for a while, and then people started hiring me to do things, and then it kind of went on for there. But I always kind of like to think it's like hoity-toity a little, but I always like to think about the art department as being sort of like, making like installations for performance, like more than being like a film kind of thing. So I don't know. I guess, yeah. So it's, I like it. It's more artistic than you would realize, but yeah. That's
a good segue to how I get into the art department of film, because I went to film school, but really no mention of production design or art department in any way. But during that time period, I was also in an art collective, and we did like very intensive interactive installations. It's like one of the things we did is that we built an apartment complex on a mezzanine level in a gallery space, and the people would show up and be handed a key to their new apartment, and then the apartment manager would let them in, and they would have a birthday cake presented to them and a Polaroid taken, and everyone would yell surprise, and then we'd shove them out the back door. And then the remnants of that was the art opening for the rest of the run of the gallery space being open, and people would just see the Polaroids on the refrigerator, and so all the little details had to feel like a real space. And so that's why I got into like just the whole idea, I guess, of like creating spaces for experiences. And then once I started working as a PA, bouncing around different departments, working as an assistant production coordinator or something, and the art department guys kept coming in, and I was like, those look like and I started, poking my head into their space more and more, realizing that that's what I need to be doing. Like, paperwork is not working for me.
I was a director and a producer in theater, and I had no money, and I wanted to do new works. This is before 2007 when the financial crisis happened. And theater in America, at least in Texas, I think predominantly in America, we were basically doing the same shows over and over again. And I didn't want to do that. And in Texas, there was nobody kind of challenging that. And so we started a little nonprofit doing original works. But we had no money, so I started building the sets. 10 years later, two guys that are filmmakers walk into my space and comment on my design of my stage adaptation of Bob Marley's life, which was unofficial. And then they, the financial crisis happened, and they said, "Hey, why don't you become an art director film for us?" And then, as film goes, people just identify you as what they experienced you as on that set. This is in the last 5 years, I think it's changed. Maybe the last 5 years, multi-hyphenates are a thing now, and so people accept that. But when I was coming in, it was especially in LA and New York, you did not mention that you were something other than what you were doing. And so I just quickly became known as a production designer. And my skill set more is just, I'm so committed to the story, I don't stop thinking about it. I'm thinking about it when I'm playing with my kids, I'm thinking about it when I'm at the store, I'm thinking about it when I'm watching TV, and all of those images that I'm gathering and the emotional context that I'm gathering boil back down to that script. And so I think that inability to turn it off, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad, but inability to turn it off. And then the fact that I came from nonprofit theater, and I think about like, oh, who would really benefit from giving me their forklift? And thus you get 12 Crown Vics.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times in indie filmmaking, that's a good point, especially for no budget, is like, if you can get someone excited about the story you're trying to tell, it's amazing what people will do to just be a part of it and like help tell the story. Free forklifts.
Which I learned the hard way, and Rudek knows this. If you're not excited about that story and you said yes, you're screwed. You know what I mean? I'm pretty passionate about storytelling in general, so I can get pretty excited about just the act of a collaboration. Man, when you find a tribe that you believe in and a script that you care about, your experience is going to escalate as a person that's down the road. If you're young and you're just starting out, say no to those things that you read and go, ugh.
Will that be a pain in the ass?
You're gonna make it up.
Yeah, like you'll read a script and you'll see the thing and you'll think, how am I going to do that? And if you don't like the script enough, then and it's going to be too much of a pain in the ass, then don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Yeah, because you are going to be the person that's
right.
Like, oh, how do I make?
You're the one who's going to do it. Yeah.
What was the coolest thing that you guys have done that you all have done with the leftovers after the film grad? And like, did you turn into art installation? Did you do a house?
Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I have like my prop storage, like in a storage unit, so you don't, I mean, it's like eventually you kind of like have a space where you keep all of this stuff that's left over from all of the jobs, and you try not to keep everything because then you turn into a hoarder. But
sometimes it's your apartment. Yeah.
You try really hard for that not to happen. But yeah, it's like, I have like 12 lampshades that I can pull from, so I don't have to buy the same thing 8 times. Or like I have my box of like stuff for restaurants, or of my box of set decoration for offices, or you know, any kind of thing. And it's like sort of designated in my space. But, you know, yeah, you kind of just hold on to those things so you don't have to buy the same thing like for every single job over and over again. Also, if you're working on a lower budget thing, then you can save money from the budget if you already have a lot of the stuff laying around. So like I'll work on commercials a lot of the time and then, you know, I'll save some things that couldn't get returned and then I'll use them for lower budget projects.
I actually do the exact opposite. I don't keep anything.
That's
I
so
own
smart.
nothing. I fall in love with items for the purpose of the film, and then I'm completely over it, kind of like a Christmas tree. And I understand. I do keep very certain elements that are incredibly difficult to find. And those things are probably it. But outside of that, people think like, oh, shoot, the house looks amazing, designer, decorator, but really, it's like the most bizarre art on the walls and like just an amalgamation of just like, why do I have that?
Where's the poodle headstone?
Where is it? Todd, do you have the poodle headstone?
Where's the what?
Do you have the poodle headstone?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know where.
Is it still in the cemetery?
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's still in the cemetery.
That should be the answer.
I think it's back in the
Cemetery.
At the place I made it?
Yeah.
So I hope, maybe it should call.
It's very happy.
We didn't move
Let's just
it. They
leave
were
it.
supposed to move it, I think. And I thought
Does anybody have any other questions? I think we're about wrapped up.
If anybody has any questions, like we can go over a few minutes. This is great so far. So speak up if you have one. If not,
Okay. Yeah.
there you go.
Very quick question, based on that last question, would a site where art directors are collaborating and sharing all the things, like the things that they retain after a project, they can share with each other? I don't know if that exists, but would that kind of thing appeal?
Well, we definitely have talked about it. I mean, in Dallas, we have two prop houses, if I'm not mistaken. South Side has a prop house. So if you're looking for things, South Side.
I didn't mean just a physical site, I mean like a website where you can actually share everything you have and you can collaborate with each other.
I don't know that
We need a lead man to get on that.
Yeah, I don't know that we've done that. We definitely talked about it, and everybody has. You know, I've got 3 storages now, but you know, the other thing, I don't know if you guys find this, but there's certain things that people have in their kits, right? That we make sure that we have so that we're ready to go. There's other things that we keep because we use them a lot, but oftentimes, and I was going to say this because Becca said, well, I like to have that so that if I'm on an indie thing, then it doesn't affect the budget. But in reality, that affects her budget. You know, so when you know, I've got 3 storages; those are like $1,000 a month. You know, I've got to make enough money to pay for that at least. You know, so and I think the challenge with the like a marketplace or a Facebook type thing or something is just coordinating that, because I could say confidently, and I've just met these 2 ladies. I know Rudak well, but I can say confidently, we're always moving. Like productions are everywhere, and I've had the fortune of pretty much staying in one area for 5 years. But that's a luxury. You don't know whether it's going to keep up. And as soon as you plan for it, it changes, you know? So it's kind of that thing that you're suggesting is almost its own business. You know, that like there's camera guys I know, they have tons of camera equipment, but they don't become a rental house because that's a job. You know, they let here locally, MPS, ELP, MLD, those people, that's what they do. And it's because people that have the same equipment, they don't want to do that. They just want to go make movies and be a part of that. So I think that's right. I don't want to speak for everybody in this community.
I don't want to be a pop house.
Any other questions? Dude, well, you guys have been so generous to listen to us ramble on. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, thank you very, very much for attending. This crowd was great. It was a good turnout. I thought the Q&A was awesome. There's some good stuff there. And I'm glad that the thing you and I talked about on a set 2 years ago actually came. Like, because I've actually been able to work with Dietrich and Rudak on a couple of different films. So yeah, so it's been nice to actually see. And I actually used to pick his brain about production design because I was actually pretty fascinated by it. So I'm glad that there was other people here who actually like share that interest.
I love the fact that we're doing it on a set where everything we just talked about is happening, and we're talking like, hey, what about production design? Yeah, that sounds good. I like that. You know.
Yeah, I was shooting BTS for this film that he was doing production design. So I was actually filming him doing production design stuff Well, I think there's sound bites from the footage of me and you talking about it,
Yeah.
and you can hear my voice from the camera side. So that was great. Thank you very much for coming out, guys. Really appreciate it. Get some movies in later on. Strawberry Mansion is at 3:30, I believe, right? Yeah, that's coming up.
Definitely check
Very
it out,
soon.
you guys.
Yeah, that's great.
So good.
Awesome. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you to the panel. One more time for the panel thing. Thanks, you guys, for coming in. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.